Well, we certainly hope so. I mean, we still have a long way to go. I think you've teed that up very well. But there is a lot more equity that is occurring across state lines. And I think when we think about our nation and the innovation economy, hopefully that's the brightest light of all, is that it's not finally limited to just the coastal tensions that have existed in entrepreneurship.
Well, let's get specific there. You have some great data on what the top 5 states are when you take a look at advancing equity for female entrepreneurs, Black entrepreneurs, Hispanic entrepreneurs. Talk us through who some of the top slots are here.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we look across our, what we're calling equity innovation leaders, there's some real interesting insights that emerge. So for example, our 7 innovation leaders that we're identifying right now are looking at Georgia, Illinois, Maryland, Michigan, Florida, and Texas. Now, across those environments, there's some certain consistencies that are emerging. For example, they're all KPI-driven innovations. They're all doing radical collaborations in really inspiring ways. They're certainly looking at continuous experimentation, so they're not limiting themselves as far as saying, we're just going to do a one-and-done moment. And ultimately, they're unlocking this $640 billion opportunity that has been identified for innovation equity in America.
You know, at the end of the day, what do you think is their advantage here? Is this demographics on the side of these states, or is it a matter of how they're regulating and taxing these companies? What is driving growth?
Great questions. I would say what we can see right now is that there are certain environments where there's a new truth behind entrepreneurial equity. What I mean by that is that perhaps while pattern matching has always been the challenge in advancing equity in entrepreneurship, there are certain regions that seem to be progressing beyond that, maybe because they don't have that history of pattern matching that was once limiting. Great examples of this are Florida, Texas, and Georgia. And what we're seeing in these 3 states is that maybe the migration of entrepreneurial excellence, the opportunities that have happened through liquidity, the capital environments, and these collaborations that are coming together are really driving new outcomes in a really inspiring way. Now, our hope is obviously we continue to collect all of this data and look at the lagging and leading indicators of what is actually going on behind states. There's no single data set right now that can tell us the whole story, but part of our Revitalizing Innovation entrepreneurial report aims to try to bring together all of this collection so that we're no longer continually investing in the first mile of the innovation economy, but actually leapfrogging to the last mile where we can see radical growth for all. And again, if we think about what's possible through this landscape, what we think that's going to happen is that we see more stickiness and more opportunity for the benefit of all business owners in America.
It is interesting. I mean, obviously, it's fascinating that Florida, Texas, and Georgia are where you see the most progress in terms of equity. It just isn't something you'd expect from watching, you know, the mainstream media. But it's also, to me, maybe more surprising that I don't see California here. You're normally in San Francisco. I would expect San Franciscans to be a leader in this.
Where's New York?
You don't see New York.
I know.
You don't see New York here either. Why is that?
Well, to be fair, what we wanted to say is we appreciate and understand deeply that the grassroots efforts of innovation has had this coastal opportunity. But it's not the only place anymore where innovation is happening in our great nation. And in fact, if anything, if we want to drive forward a greater blueprint, what we're seeing with our incredible collaborators from Penn State University's Evidence to Impact collaboration, looking at policy and the influence of policy across America, as well as Heartland Forward, that's looked at the rise of all businesses in America, there's much more opportunity that's happening in Middle America and spreading across to the outside areas. And we're also seeing that there's a regional strength that is emerging from these locations too. I mean, imagine seeing talent differently in these places and spaces that have just kind of not been on the top of everyone's minds. We aim to change that and really celebrate those incredible leaders and what they're doing.
And I do appreciate that with this report, you're focusing on the positive aspects, of course, which states score highly here. But I have to ask, who's at the bottom of the list? What states aren't necessarily a great place for these sorts of advancements?
Well, maybe what I'll do is I'll flip it a little bit and say that there's a critical importance of sort of looking at a few key aspects to the methodology of how this report did. So number one, we wanted to actually normalize the data through Heartland Forward's great research and understand what is the percentage ratio of equity that's happening inside those states. That means how many businesses are actually being started by Black, Hispanic, Hispanic and women entrepreneurs? And then what is that percentage of the ratio overall of that representation and those identities within those states? And then finally, are they actually paying themselves above the average wage? Now, while I know that's a little bit not the typical conversation when it comes to entrepreneurial advancement and innovation, we know that for many with the lived experience, not paying themselves is not a possibility. So we need to start to understand and look at metrics differently than have historically emerged around this key topic.